Hello, this is Bridget McKenzie. I'm going to be talking about creative responses to the Earth crisis, what artists have done and what you can do. And this is one of the Morley Penny lectures and part of Green Week. So the Earth needs you. The planet has never been in such dire trouble due to human activities. But hope for our future lies in humans too, as we're ingenious creative beings. So I'm going to talk about how some creative people are taking action, including myself and my associates in Climate Museum UK, what we're doing to change minds and to inspire people to regenerate the planet. So I hope you'll get some inspiration for creative things that you can do as well. So Climate Museum UK, it's a fairly new museum. It's a mobile and digital museum, and we're stirring and collecting responses to the climate and ecological emergency. We're a team of creative people distributed across the UK, and we each in our own way practice and gather art, objects, games and books, and then we use them to activate people. But we come together to work on lots of projects and to offer training as well. And these kinds of activations help people to play, make, think and talk about the Earth crisis and to open up their imaginations to possible futures. When we first started out in 2019, we were running lots of workshops and pop-ups in the real world. And then with COVID-19, we were forced to go online, and we've been running lots of activities online. And we make sure that our activities are always conversational. It's always really about having playful and creative ways to engage with these really difficult and complicated ideas. But we always hope to leave people with a sense of what they can do, and whether that's taking action in a really easy, small scale way in their own lives, or whether it's being creative to express their emotions, or whether it's taking bigger, ambitious kind of action. So I'm going to be talking through some of the different ways that you can do that. So I think that that creativity is really important. I'm not an artist. I don't call myself an artist. I'm a researcher, a creative curator, but I am a creative, and I practice creativity as a way to increase my my well-being, my sense of connection to the world, to other people, and to explore ideas and thoughts. It's a way of sort of going into myself, but also exploring the wider world. And so I do photography, I do illustration, and and I make objects for the museum as well. I create artworks using found objects or old games, and I turn them into kind of artworks that we can use for conversations. The other thing that I do is to get involved in movements and, to join up with other people. And one of those movements is called Culture Declares Emergency. And this was formed, I helped form it in early 2019. And we are a community of artists and cultural organisations who have declared a climate and ecological emergency. But after this declaration has to come action. We can't just leave it at making a statement. So we form a community and we share ideas about what we can do together, and we also advocate for change. So what is this emergency? So humanity is waging war on nature. It's suicidal. Nature always strikes back, and it's already doing so with growing force and fury. Biodiversity is collapsing. 1 million species are at risk of extinction. Ecosystems are disappearing before our eyes. Now, this is a quote from Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, and he goes on to say, human activities are at the root of our descent toward chaos, but that means human action can help to solve it. So humans are the cause and also the solution. And that means that culture, in the widest sense, culture is the cause and it's also the solution. Humans are ingenious. We have the technology now to be able to see inside brains, to visit Mars, to solve enormous problems like a worldwide pandemic by developing a vaccine in record time. So we have to apply this creativity to the biggest crisis that the planet has ever known, and that is the climate crisis. But we also have to understand that the climate crisis didn't arise out of nowhere. It arose out of long histories. We have to look at these root causes and long histories. And the root cause is essentially extractivism. I'm going to go on to talk about that in a minute, but I just wanted to point out this image of roots is from a film called Underground Market by Toby Kears and artist Niels Hobers. Extractivism is well known as the extraction of coal and oil and minerals, but it's actually much more than that. It's actually at the heart of capitalism, which extracts goods and wealth and resources and knowledge in ever accelerating ways. And it turns these into profit. It accumulates those resources, but it doesn't give back. It doesn't put back. So people, wild species, their land, their rights, all of these have been taken away. And if we look at the impact that this is having, so extractivism is essentially ecocidal. If we look at this diagram, ecocide at the top left, it's the destruction of ecosystems, and this has been going on for centuries. But in recent decades, there's been an acceleration of the consumption of fossil fuels. And altogether, this ecocide and fossil fuel extraction is causing the use of 140% of Earth's biocapacity. And that's worsened by the delay on climate action that is being affected by the fossil fuel industries. So they are pushing for a delay on action, making us think that we've got until 2050 or 2060 to take action to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels. But it's already happening. Climate change is already here, and it's already catastrophic for many people. And then also the impacts of ecocide are causing resource insecurity and disease like COVID-19. We have to move away from this extractivist past. This is a collage that I did to try to explain that cannibalistic and suicidal aspect of being extractivist. It's a kind of Trump-like figure eating the world. So how can we move on from this image to a more regenerative future, like the collage on the right, where the world is overseen by wisdom? The owl represents wisdom. And how can we move on to new ways of exchange, new ways of doing economics? For example, I'm very inspired by Kate Raworth's model called donut economics, where we need to create a safe and just space for humanity, where people have their needs met, but within the limits of the planet. And so we need to be able to explain these ideas. And here's an example. It's a film by Damon Gameau. It's a documentary where he uses kind of future travel and imaging to try to explain these big ideas. And here's an image that shows the donut in a very sort of graphic way. It shows people falling into the center of the donut, but they need to be in that ring where they are in that safe and just space for humanity. And I've been thinking about what culture and creativity can do to create that safe and just space. So I've devised this framework called Culture Takes Action, and it has these 8 domains of practice, 8 different things that we can do. So they include decarbonizing our cultural practice, they include decolonizing, working locally to help communities transition to a more green economy, or taking ambitious system-changing global action, like helping to implement the global goals. But we're up against obstacles all the time in trying to explain and trying to move to these regenerative ways of thinking. Some of the obstacles include the fact that we're on this trajectory of exponential growth. We also, as humans, have a poor response to slow-moving, complex threats like climate change. We also have a culture of separation from nature, and it's a culture of everyday ecocide. And you can find, if you go to Facebook, you can find one of our projects called Everyday Ecocide, where we're collecting examples in culture and media of how we ignore and neglect the environment or ecology in everything that we do. And then finally, the other thing that is a block to us is the power of the fossil fuel industries. So let's have a look at what artists or creative people have done to try to shift, to try to change the way we think and the way we behave. So some ingredients I'm going to talk through. We need creative mindsets. We need more people to be creative. We need ecocentric mindsets. We need more stories or narratives that are ecocentric. We need more eco-innovation in our businesses and our design world. And we need creative direct activism. We still need it. So I'll just talk a little bit about what I mean by creative mindsets. So you could say that there are 5 areas to being creative. It isn't just about producing art. Creative mindsets are just ways of thinking and being that are available to all of us. So we can all be imaginative. We can imagine how other people and other beings feel about and experience a changing planet, and we can imagine alternatives. We can be inquisitive, so we can see and envisage the systemic connections in our human history, and that includes being able to inquire into or face the true facts of the situation. We can be disciplined, so we need to find an effective path or task for ourselves and just stick to it. We can be collaborative, so we need to imagine and know ourselves as not exceptional over others. We need to see that we have to collaborate with each other and with nature. And we can be persistent, so we have to keep reminding ourselves, I am the person who can be the change. So, don't give up. So being creative, it's the most important thing we can do, I think, because to be human is to be creative. So if we're not expressing ourselves creatively, we're not living to our full humanity. These images are of my daughter, Meg. She's 21 and she is now an artist, but she always has been. You can see her there as a baby, sorting rocks and exploring and noticing the different textures and colours. And then we really encouraged her to carry on making art, and now she makes wonderful animations. So there are many, many people expressing their creativity in many different ways, including people who are environmentalists or scientists. You don't just have to be an artist to be creative. So moving on to another kind of mindset that is vital is about being ecocentric. And this is really about being in service to life. It's about making a pledge that you will move on from just being in service to yourself or your family, but being in service to the continuity of future generations of humans and other beings. Once you've done that, once you've made that pledge, it becomes, you notice everyday ecocide in everything. You start to see all of the kind of cracks, and you start to want to make in every situation that you're in, you want to make it less competitive, more cooperative. You want to shift from a consumerist world into an abundant world. And you also want to stop inequality and to try to create more equality. You want to end extractive, exploitative culture, and you want to create a more regenerative culture. So what are the ways of doing that? Apart from just wanting to, we have to share it with other people. So one way to do it is to broadcast those shifts and stories, to use narrative. And here's an example of a project which has been set up by Manda Scott, who you might know from writing novels about Boudica. And she started writing TV scripts and has set up an organization called Narrative Arc, which is trying to create transformative, regenerative television. You might be the kind of person that doesn't want to necessarily tell stories, but you want to make things. So here's an example of an artist, a designer called Dan Rusagada, who has designed a whole range of amazing things, but these are his smog filtering bikes. So as you ride your bike, you're clearing the smog out of the air in front of you, but you're actually reducing smog for other people as well. So it's a perfect example of a regenerative object. It's not only doing little harm, it's actually helping. Another thing that artists can do is to use their artistic copyright. So this artist, Aviva Ramani, her artwork, Blued Trees, was about creating an artwork using nature to stop the path of an oil pipeline. So she created a document that asserted that this artwork of blued trees, blue painted trees in a forest, was not to be moved. You can also express your creativity by activism. In activism, for example, gastavists have been doing hacks of ads, for example, turning shell ads at bus stops into images that show the damage that fossil fuels have done. You can also take direct action as an artist by planting, by regenerating land. So for example, Ackroyd and Harvey took the acorns from Joseph Beuys's trees that he planted in his artwork, 7,000 Oaks, and they've been nursing these acorns into saplings, and they'll be planting them. And here's another example of a fairly large scale artwork. It's by Michael Pinsky. It's called Pollution Pods, and he's created this installation of 5 spheres or pods that you go into, and each one of them has the atmosphere, the air quality of a different city, and all of them are, you know, difficult, they're polluted, and so you experience what it's like to live in those cities. And here's a similar idea. This is a project called Weather the Weather. It's also an environment, a small greenhouse that is recreating the weather in 3 different times in history, not in different places, but in London. The last date in this installation is 2080. Another artwork, which is quite conceptual. This is by an artist called James Webb. It's a cube of oil in a glass box. So there's not much to look at, but the artwork consists mainly of a series of 100 questions addressed to these 5 litres of Nigerian crude oil. And the questions, you listen to them in an audio piece. And the questions are trying to really give subjectivity to this oil so that you can actually think about oil in a different way, to sort of bring it to life. And then another approach is to create games so that people can explore ideas of complexity to do with climate or ecology. And here, for example, is a game called The Other 99%. The reason I like this game is that it is not just about environmental science, but it's about human decisions and urban planning. So this game, every player is a real estate developer. One player starts with 3 times more money than the others. And as the sea level rises, they can afford to build on higher ground. So it's a kind of scenario game that encourages you to make decisions. That's by Urban Works, and the artist who made it is Jeanette Kim. So that was a fast ride through a whole a range of different types of art that are helping us think differently and helping us shift to a more regenerative future. And I just want to finish off by talking about what you can do. So you can be creative, and I urge you to find creative ways to face the earth crisis. For example, one activity that we do in Climate Museum UK is that we invite people to imagine climate change as an object, and it really helps because you can externalize it and simplify it. Another thing that you can do is just to tell the truth, but maybe find creative ways to do it. So you could organize a mass reading of climate science. For example, as in this project, lots of people read the IPCC report in many different cities. Here's an example of a project that you could do in a simple way. You can educate people to change systems. And for example, Choked Up are a group of young people who got together to campaign against air pollution. And they managed to organize this advertising hoarding where the lungs are made from a cloth that absorbs the color, that absorbs the pollution from the air and changes color. So that kind of thing is within your reach. Another thing that you can do is not so much to tell your own truth, but to amplify the voices of people who are first and worst affected by climate change. So here in this project, there's the Warriors of the Pacific who have taken photographs of what it's like to live on an island with rising sea levels. So you can use those and share and spread those voices or those photographs and similar ones. Another thing that you can do is to wear your messages, put your messages on your clothes, walk out the door with your views on your sleeve. And I make a lot of different clothes with messages on. For example, this shirt that I wear has "Our house is on fire" on the back, which is the phrase that Greta Thunberg uses. And finally, an easy thing that you can do is to take more creative care for nature. So that might mean just noticing nature. It might mean going out with a bag and picking up rubbish from around trees. So we've been encouraging people to do acts of river kindness and acts of tree kindness, and then to share them using these hashtags. So I would urge you to choose any one of these. Simply expressing yourself, or simply choosing to find creative ways to care for nature and to explain to other people the truths about how the planet is suffering, but also the ideas that you have for how we can live a more regenerative in a more regenerative world. So we can create the more beautiful world that we know is possible.